This is the cover of my new book, The Sunken Peninsula, an astonishing underwater city at the Latakia Ridge. And we're going to start by familiarizing those of you who are not familiar with the Eastern Mediterranean about what it looks like. Again, everything in color is underwater. Now we're going to focus in on the northeastern Mediterranean Sea. And you can see the Latakia Ridge right over here, extending downward. And I'm going to get closer and closer so you can see some of the details. Latakia Ridge is right there, closer to Syria than Cyprus. And I've drawn it in over here so you can see this long, narrow ridge extending off Latakia city in Syria. Here you can see the Latakia Ridge. The seafloor itself is about negative 1,400 meters. And the area that we're concerned about, that light green area, is about 400 meters underwater. The rectangular area that we're going to be focusing in on is about 500 meters below water. It's about 25 kilometers to the coastline. And as we proceed, we're going to get closer and closer to that area so we can see it in more detail. So this is what I propose this peninsula looked like before the Eastern Mediterranean basin sank underwater forever. It was a long rectangular valley extending westward from the eastern shores of the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Syria. And I'm going to show you how it was once a habitated site, as strange as it sounds, and that it was an engineered city down there. I know it sounds outrageous, unbelievable, but I'm going to prove it to you tonight. So you can see the Latakia Ridge again extending downward. There is what appears to be a crack right down the middle of it. And that is actually where the great river used to be. So here we're looking southward. Let's say Latakia city is over here. And you have this meandering river path that goes along the entire length until it reaches this area right here. And you can see that there is a rectangular enclosure there with a lot of strange formations. This area drew my attention some time ago, and I got closer and closer to it, and I developed more and more models and used different techniques to bring out what we're actually seeing here. Nobody looks for underwater cities 25 miles off a coastline, 600 meters underwater. But I was sure that there was something here, and so I spent the time and effort necessary to bring this out and to visualize it so you can see what's going on. As you can see, there's a very strange canal or river path that meanders underwater, and then it reaches this rectangular area there, complete with two 90-degree turns, and what appears to be another canal that goes from here to here. Here's a side view of it. And as you can see, the images are astonishing. There's clearly some kind of a river path going here, and it suddenly ends, and then there are multiple 90-degree angles that we're going to be looking at more. This is what it looks like, that rectangular valley with the 90-degree turns. A canal that came up. So this is actually the summit of the Latakia Ridge, sort of the crown of Latakia Ridge, perched on top, the river path going right down the length of the ridge, and then meeting this canal that comes down off the summit, and then that rectangular valley. The rectangular valley, this is a top view of it. The rectangular valley is extremely anomalous. I've had a lot of fun with AI with this over the course of the last year. It has no explanation for it. None of the AI models have an explanation for it. That rectangular enclosure there is almost completely flat, which is practically unheard of in underwater formations. You could think of it like a calm lake. That's how flat it is. And it's perched on top of a mountainous ridge. And here again, you see this clear river path, and then you see a canal, or whatever you want to call it, a trench, that comes from the side of the hill to the top of the summit, runs across and goes all the way down. It's almost a straight line. And of course, you see the eastern side of the wall with the 90-degree angle, the western side with the 90-degree angle, basin number 1, basin number 2, basin number 3 is down there. It's not visible in this picture, and the mound in the middle. So don't expect scientists to say, oh, this is a human settlement site. They're not allowed. Science is not set up that way. It's set up to get rid of fringe theories, to stop pseudoscience from coming into the picture, and only talk about things that are absolutely proven beyond a shadow of a doubt to exist. But every new discovery has to go outside of what is already known by default. And therefore, we're gathering or we're projecting conclusions or likelihoods based on the circumstantial evidence. Now, if this was a court of law and I brought this many circumstantial evidences in, whoever was on trial would be hung, because there's enough here to establish a very firm conclusion. What are the odds? The answers that I got, and I went through every model, is at least 1 in a million. There's a 1 in a million chance that this is natural, which is another way of saying that it's impossible for it to be natural. This is what it's seeing. This is what the AI models are seeing. A river path that ends at a T-junction, a canal that goes straight to the east to one side, goes down the summit, one that cuts to the west, down the summit again. Remember, this is perched on top of the Latakia Ridge. And then you have a moat. This moat is not visible. Almost everything here is visible to the naked eye. There's a couple of things that are not visible that AI sees because it sees patterns that you can't see with your eyes. And again, this is based on real data. When it first told me that there is a moat around a rectangular wall, I didn't believe it. I still have trouble believing it. But there is. And I'm going to show you diagrams about the sizes and the measurements. There is a moat that runs around that rectangular wall that connects to this channel and then connects to this meandering river path. On the southern side, next to Basin 1 and Basin 2, there is that canal that runs down to the side of the hill. So this, what you're looking at here, is exactly how a human settlement site of this size would be engineered to control, direct, and distribute water around this city. Yes, I said a city. The other thing that you can't see with the naked eye is this cross. That cross cannot be seen. That I had even more trouble believing than the moat, just because I know a lot about mythology, and the cross is a very ancient sign that comes from, shall I say it, the Garden of Eden. Sign of the cross comes from the Garden of Eden. I've asked these models again and again and again, are you sure, are you certain that there is two canals, there are two canals that cut this rectangular enclosure into 4 equal parts with a mound in the middle, and that they intersect each other in the middle of this rectangular valley at a perfect 90-degree angle? That can't be possible. It's there. Let's continue. Now this, I created a diagram to show you just how anomalous this area is. So starting with the meandering river path around here is straight for about 600 meters. It's 14 meters wide, about 3 meters deep, with a slope that is appropriate for water management. The T-junction, 2 sharp 90-degree angles, right there. The west channel and the east channel, the crossbar of the T-junction, total length 2.5 kilometers, width 250 to 300 meters consistently. That means it is consistently within that 2.5 mile kilometer length, is consistently 250 to 300 meters width. The depth across the entire 2.5 kilometers is 30 to 35 meters. These are all unheard of underwater. It just doesn't work that way, where there is consistency in the depth, the width, and the length, and they are straight. The side walls of this channel are high relief, near vertical, as if they were dug out. Let's continue. The north to south wall on that side, it's about 480 meters of it is exposed. Its height is consistently 3.7 meters. The thickness is 4 meters. And it's 98% ruler straight. The east to west wall, 390 meters exposed, 3.5 meters wide. Remember, the height of this wall is 3.7 meters. The height of the east to west is 3.5 meters. The thickness is 4 meters, just exactly the same as this wall. The corners are 89.9 to 90.1 degrees. Impossible to happen in nature. Doesn't end there. The 2 intersecting canals that form a perfect cross, 390 meters width on the north to south side arm, with a 10-meter depth and, with width of 10 meters and a depth of 2.5 meters. The east-west arm, 480 meters long, exactly the same width, 10 meters, exactly the same depth, 2.5 meters. My mind gets boggled by what I'm looking at. The perimeter moat that goes around the rectangular enclosure, about 20 meters wide, about 2.5 to 3 meters deep. The vertical canal here that connects the T-junction to the rectangular enclosure, 165 meters long, 10 meters wide, 2.4 to 2.6 meters deep. The moat is 2.5 to 3 meters deep. The intersecting canals are 2.5 meters deep. They're all the same depth. These walls are the same thickness, the same height, ruler straight. It divides that rectangular enclosure into 4 equal parts with a mound in the middle that I also had trouble believing, and yet it is there. It's visually there. You can see it with the naked eye. AI confirms it, and it gives you all the details you need. Again, take your own, on our website, which is www.sunkenpeninsula.com. I've actually put the data that I've extracted off of that EMODnet site so that you don't have to, but you could if you want. You take that data, upload it onto your AI model, and ask. Here's a look again at a side view with the river path and the rectangular enclosure. And I'm showing you this because I want to show you the the Persian charbagh, which is a symbol that was supposed to come from the first human civilization, which gave birth to all the other civilizations. Look at that, and then look at this, and tell me you're not awed, because I certainly am. This is a depiction of the ancient city of Babylon. Babylon was enclosed by walls and a surrounding moat in a rectangular flat valley that had a river that cut right through it. The Euphrates River was directed into the city with a choke point so that they could control the rate of that flow exactly how our site had that chokehold at the T-junction with the two triangular formations. That would have been where they controlled the flow rate. How is this possible? Another rectangle, but there's more. All of the ancient world's most important holy sites, like the city of Babylon, were also pointing exactly to true north. The rectangle itself was pointed intentionally to true north. This was something we saw in Babylon, in Persia, in Sumeria, in Egypt, and all these ancient sites. Well, guess what? Our site, 500 meters below water, 25 kilometers from the coast, is aligned directly to true north. Let's keep going. Here's the Egyptian version of their temple enclosures. Again, a rectangular enclosed wall or valley, flat valley, with a temple in the middle that was aligned to true north, often shown with a river path that flowed directly into it, and a moat. All coincidence? Let's get real. Now here's a side view of the Mediterranean Sea, just so you see that the Western Mediterranean is not as deep as the Eastern Mediterranean. So obviously the question here is, how in the world does a human habitation site 25 miles away from the shoreline, 500 meters down, how did this happen? How is that even possible for a landmass to sink 500 meters or more? And that's what we're going to go into next. Scientists know, and it's been proven, that 5.3 million years ago, there was something called the Zanclean flood. Now, the Mediterranean Sea is between the African tectonic plate and the Eurasian plate. When they close here, because they're always coming together and drifting apart, in the millions of years. When it comes together, the Mediterranean, like a swimming pool under sunlight, eventually evaporates. When they pull apart again at the Gibraltar, there is a giant flood that comes in and fills in the Western Mediterranean, and when that's filled up, it goes across what used to be the Sicilian land bridge, with a 1.5 kilometer waterfall, 1,000 times bigger than Niagara Falls. It's almost unimaginable. And then eventually flows into the Eastern Mediterranean and fills that up. This is known. We found out about it in the 1970s. It's been proven. Scientists, of course, didn't believe it at first. They mocked the people that came up with this theory, but then it was proven to be true. And that's how it usually is. When that Strait of Gibraltar breaks open, we don't really have, even AI couldn't make an accurate depiction, because how do you depict a waterfall 1,000 times bigger than Niagara Falls, 14 kilometers long, 1.5 kilometers drop? This is the best I could come up with, but it's much more dramatic than this. So the Gibraltar breaks, the Atlantic Ocean pours into what is now an empty or partially filled Mediterranean Sea or Mediterranean basin, because at that time it didn't have much water. It would be more accurate to call an ocean fall than a waterfall, because that's what's happening. An ocean is falling into an empty basin. We went through a lot of models trying to decide, and a lot of other people have done it too, but AI, of course, brings a new, several new elements into the picture. This flood would have moved around 200 miles an hour. As it flowed from the Gibraltar, it fell down in this giant waterfall. It flowed eastward. It slowly filled up the Western Mediterranean, went over the Sicilian land bridge, what used to be a land bridge, and then another even bigger waterfall went into the Eastern Mediterranean and filled that basin up until the water rose and brought it to where it is today. That initial wall of water would have been gigantic. 200 miles an hour, carrying that much rock and water at that speed would have been something like what AI compares to an atomic bomb minus the heat and the radiation. It would have absolutely pulverized everything on its path. As it flowed along the bottom, reached the easternmost margin, and then rose until it filled it up like a bathtub. This is another depiction of something that it would have looked like. So let's get into a little bit of mythology. The ancient people call the Strait of Gibraltar the Pillars of Hercules, because the legend was that the Gibraltar land bridge, what used to be a Gibraltar land bridge, was pulled apart or pushed apart by Hercules on his 10th labor. And that, they said, is what connected the Atlantic Ocean with the Mediterranean and filled it up. They thought it was through the work of Hercules. These are some accounts from the ancient world, some of the most famous historians, philosophers, and some of the first geographers of the world. Herodotus said, I'm showing you this because they all have something terribly wrong with them. They share something that is terribly wrong, and I want to see if you can guess what it is. The first one is from Herodotus, 440 BC. I have myself seen the place called the Pillars of Hercules or Hercules. There's also a temple there, and the people place themselves affirm, and I hold that Hercules was a very ancient god. The Greeks say that he first opened the passage of the sea at the pillars. That's the Hercules myth or legend. Plato, in his famous book Timaeus, that talked about Atlantis, he also talked about the earthquakes and flood. And in a single day, there was this giant mega flood, and it sunk the island of Atlantis. Aristotle, outside the Pillars of Hercules, the sea is shallow owing to the mud, but calm, for it lies in a hollow. Diodorus, some authorities say that the two continents were originally joined, but that Hercules cut a passage between them, and that by opening the passage, he brought about the ocean was mingled with the sea. That's the Atlantic Ocean mingled with the Mediterranean Sea. Now, let's see who's paying attention. What's wrong with all of these passages? What's wrong? What do they have in common? What they have in common is that none of them should exist. How did people living 2,000 years ago know about a flood that happened 5.3 million years ago when there was no humanity to witness it? When I first presented that question to AI, it tried to find a way to explain it, but in the end it couldn't. You see, the Strait of Gibraltar is 14 kilometers wide. You can barely see the other side from this side. It's an hour-long ferry ride right now. And there was a series of mountain ranges there, 14 miles, about the size of the base of Mount Vesuvius. How would that come down for thousands of years and reach the first geographers and the first philosophers 2,000 years ago? Because this story is ancient, it's prehistoric. The legend of Hercules is prehistoric. We don't know really where it started. It's at least 3,000 to 4,000 years old, but there is no beginning where we say it started here. It's prehistoric. So these philosophers, these geographers, when they were talking about this, they were trying to make sense of an ancient myth. And we're starting to think scientifically. How did this happen? But what's relevant to us is how in the world would they know that? It's impossible. But it goes further. They also knew that it happened by an earthquake. How would they know that? This is only confirmed in the 1970s, 2,000 years before after these people lived. How would they know that? But there's even more. How would they know that there was a giant mega flood? The only way they could have known that is if they knew that the Atlantic was a lot higher than the Mediterranean basin, so that when the Gibraltar broke, it created a gigantic, unimaginable flood. They knew that there used to be a land bridge there, 14 kilometers long, a mountain ridge, a series of mountain ridges. They knew that it broke by an earthquake, and they knew that the Mediterranean basin was partially empty. That's the only way that flood could happen. How could they have known these things? It's not logical. It's not possible. In the Russian geophysicists, particularly Yakov Malovitsky, a few decades ago, they did studies on the Eastern Mediterranean and the Latakia Ridge. And they concluded that the Eastern Mediterranean seafloor used to be much higher, because the crust under an ocean is very compressed, thin and dense, and yet the crust under the Eastern Mediterranean is thick and layered. It can only mean one thing. Through all their studies, they discovered that the Eastern Mediterranean used to be a lot higher, that the basin, what is now a basin of a seafloor, anywhere from 1,000, 1,500 to 4,000 meters deep, used to be on top, subaerial exposure, not underwater. These are some of the best geophysicists the world has. And they knew that the Eastern Mediterranean used to be higher. The myths from the ancient world, starting from the Bible, talk about a mountainous island or peninsula that was completely engulfed. How does a mountainous island that has thousands of feet, these mountains that go up thousands of feet, how does that get engulfed in water and disappear from view? That's not a flood. That can only happen is if that landmass is in a basin that gets filled with water. Starting with the Hebrew Bible, Genesis, right from the beginning, the waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth, and all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. The mountains under the whole world. Remember, the whole world, when they talk about the whole world, To them, in those times, the whole world was just the Mediterranean Sea and the countries around it, the lands around it. That was their world. They didn't know anything outside the Atlantic. They didn't know much of anything. High mountains under the whole heaven were covered. Book of Enoch. All the fountains of the earth were opened, and the water rose upon the earth until it covered all the high mountains. Mesopotamia's Sumerian sources, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. The storm flood flattened the mountains. No man could see his fellow, nor could the people be distinguished from the sky. The waters covered the mountain peaks. The Atrahasis, the flood swept over the mountains. The Sumerian flood story, Ziusudra, the storm had swept over the mountains and submerged them. The Greek traditions, the flood of Deucalion. The waters rise until only Mount Parnassus remains above water. Everything else is submerged. Deucalion's arc comes to rest on the flood-covered mountain. Even the lofty peaks of mountains were covered by water. In our case, it also included the subsidence of the basin itself, the sinking of the basin because of the trillions of tons of water that came in and filled it. It's called isostatic adjustment. Think of the basin on a seafloor like a mattress or a trampoline. You put weight on it, it goes down. If you take the weight off, it starts to come up again. That's actually happening in Scandinavia today. It's a well-known phenomenon. So as this water came, the basin sank while the water rose because this basin was being filled up. So the Latakia Ridge would have gone down as the water rose. And we also know that there was uplift on the eastern margin, which means the landmass, because these two tectonic plates, one pushes under the other. One of the other effects is that the landmass on the sides rise. So you have rising coastline, you have rising water level, and you have a sinking basin. And that is how you sink a landmass 500 meters underwater. The whole world knew about this, talked about it openly as a fact. It's only our generation that we think of it as myth. They certainly did not. Their whole civilizations revolved around this so-called myth. Their religions, their laws, their belief system, their version of the Genesis, their ceremonies, their symbolism, their holidays, all of them revolved around this so-called myth. How does that happen? If it's the first place where civilization started and it radiated outward, how can it be something that happened in the Atlantic? First of all, how can something in the Atlantic that's thousands of feet high, mountainous island, get completely submerged? That does not happen in the Atlantic. The Egyptian priests said that the flood affected the Nile Delta. That great flood that took the island affected the Nile Delta. How does something that happened, let's say it's even possible that a mountainous island in the Atlantic could be completely submerged, which is impossible. The Atlantic has never risen, can never rise thousands of feet. That's crazy. How does that, let's say it did happen. How would a flood in the Atlantic go through that choke point of the Strait of Gibraltar, flow thousands of miles east and affect the Nile Delta? It's impossible. How does the origin of civilization all the way out in the Atlantic, why does it leave no trace anywhere in Europe? Why is the civilization as we know it radiating out from where I'm standing in Cyprus, in the Near East? All of the most ancient civilizations in the world are right around here. So we know that it had to be in a basin that was engulfed. We know that it had to be somewhere near the area where we know civilization started. We know it can't be in the Atlantic. And we also know that this flood actually did happen through real science. And supposedly it was 5.3 million years ago, but tell me how that's possible if people 2,000 years ago knew about it. Everything we need to establish that these so-called myths are actually real stories have been knocked down one after another by this supposed scientific theory that it happened 5.3 million years ago. It's just a date. Because they said it was 5.3 million years ago, people said the biblical stories have to be false. All the mythology from around the world had to be false. It all had to be just written by crazy primitive people that didn't know what they're talking about. And yet we have these undeniable problems with that. How did the ancient people know? About the flood, about the earthquake, about the Strait of Gibraltar once being a land bridge. We have scientific evidence saying that the Eastern Mediterranean floor used to be much higher. And of course, we now have this. How does this happen? What is that? We need to go there and investigate this further. I'm here to tell you that the greatest treasure in human history will be found inside that rectangular enclosure. You're going to find ziggurats, pyramids, canals, walls, and probably megalithic structures, statues, temples. There's just no way that all of these anomalies that basically show what's obviously a human-engineered, man-made site. It's in Syria's territory, just outside their exclusive economic zone, but still in Syrian territory. It's only 550 meters underwater. My initial target was 1,500 meters underwater. This is nothing, okay? The tallest building in the world right now in Dubai is 800 meters tall. It's shorter than that. Doesn't mean that it's easy. Anything underwater that goes beyond several hundred meters becomes pitch black, no oxygen, incredible water pressure, difficult to work with, but it's definitely doable, and all we need is a sonar reading. I guarantee you, you're going to find the most priceless, the most precious human artifacts the world has ever seen right there. I think we're on the verge of making a great unthinkable discovery. I went through a 4-month period of walking around in a daze. I could not accept it, even though I've been working on this for 30 years, my entire adult life. It's so bizarre that it challenges me. I had to struggle with what I was seeing. And so I don't expect people to understand. I don't expect them to believe, because your mind is going to tell you that your eyes are lying to you. The mind is going to stop it, not because of what it sees, but because of the ramifications. The ramifications is what's going to make it difficult for people to understand, because the ramifications are endless, world-changing, history-changing. Every history book in the world that talks about origins will have to be thrown out. It'll be outdated overnight. Everything will have to be written from scratch. All the things that we thought we knew will have to be thrown in the dumpster, and we'll have to start from scratch again. And that's just how science is. We just sent that James Webb telescope up. We thought we knew everything about how the universe started. We send the telescope up. Oh, we know nothing. Everything you thought you knew was wrong. That's how it is. And so I expect that. I expect the resistance. I expect people to say it can't be. That's all perfectly natural. But your eyes cannot lie to you forever. And so I'm asking you to help me. I already have the permission of the Syrian government. I need a research vessel and a side scan sonar and a couple of days out at sea, just 25 miles off the coast. And I will bring you an earth-changing, history-changing, world-changing, the most priceless artifacts that have ever been found are sitting there waiting.